Hi, this is Glenn Hughes, and you're watching Loudwire. When Tony invited me to sing on his solo album, he invited me and Dio and Rob Halford to sing as lead vocalists on his solo album.
Mm-hmm. Those which EP sessions, right?
No, this is Seventh Star. This is like well before you were born.
Iommi. Okay, I thought you were going.
85 when we were doing.
91.
So here I am writing an album was going to be called Tony Iommi, and I wrote this song with him called Seventh Star. And we finished mixing, and then Warner Brothers came in with Don Arden, Sharon's dad, and said, "We've changed our minds. We want to call it Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi." And of course, Tony was really upset because this was his opportunity to have a solo album. And I was a little bit upset because I didn't want to sing. And with all due respect, you can't duplicate Ozzy. No. You can't duplicate Ozzy's tone. And I love Ronnie, and I just loved Ronnie. He and I was and as I am with Ozzy, it was a difficult period for me to duplicate and emulate that. Again, I was not the man I am today. So, difficult. It was difficult. Mm-hmm. And Sabbath fans are so amazing. And I would gladly go back and do it all again for free for them, because I was not the man I am today. So I have fond memories of working with Tony. Very, we are still tight as a drum.
Yeah, because you sang on his album Fused, and then there's a Sabbath.
Fused. The DEP was Tony and I literally working at his house, and we went in the studio. We were just actually riffing and making some new songs, not to be on an album. And some jackass got in there and got a reel and unmixed it and sent it out. And it really upset us.
For years, there were just bootlegs of that existed.
Bootlegs, and then Tony went in. Tony went in Birmingham and kind of remixed it, and it was a bit of a strange moment. But the Fused album, just for those that don't know, Tony and I did an album in 2005 called Fused, and history books go back. When Fused was supposed to be toured, Sharon didn't do this on purpose, but Sharon said to Tony, "Why don't we reform Sabbath for Ozfest?" As we were about to start doing a Fused tour. So Fused was like completely taken off the front burner. Because when I listen to Fused now with Kenny Aronoff on drums and Tony and I, and Bob Marlette producing and playing keyboards, my God, that's a great album. It's a really good album. And Tony and I still get together for dinner and go, "Shall we make another one?"
I was just going to ask you. After the Sabbath tour, he's talked about working with Tony Martin.
And I think he should. Well, we spoke. I did a Ronnie tribute a couple of years ago, and Tony and Geezer were there at the table together. And we always talk about. I mean, Tony. I just love him, and I love the fact that he's in recovery from his cancer, and he's really doing a great job of recovery. His recovery is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. But if Tony was to call me and say, "Shall we go in the studio?" Yeah, because we're family. Mm-hmm. And we kind of have unfinished business, but let's be clear, Tony's health is number one first. And if the opportunity arises, sure.
Yeah, you can't make the album if he's not healthy. So
no.
Obviously that comes first. And how did it feel stepping on stage for that final Heaven and Hell show? And that was the last time. It was kind of a weird send-off. It's Heaven and Hell at a festival in the middle of the day. There's bands going on after, and then you shared the stage with Jorn Land and gave that final send-off to Ronnie. I did it for Ronnie. For those of you that don't know, Ronnie was dear friend. When Ronnie opened for Deep Purple in 1974, I heard from my dressing room a voice that I thought was coming from a man at least 6'4", with huge lungs and big feet. I'm kind of making fun of it. So I go to the stage, and there's a very tiny guy with a huge voice and a rocking sound, and I was transfixed by his persona. Hadn't met him yet. So when he came off the stage, I grappled him, and he came with me, and that from that moment, at that first show, he was like, I was so blown away by his presence, and then realizing he was such a lovely, lovely man, a lovely, lovely guy who went on to become the most generous artist I've seen with his fans ever in rock. And I formed a bond with him and when he moved from New York, after he left Rainbow, he moved to the area in LA where I lived. So Wendy was his wife, and he was an old friend of mine because he used to date Ian Pace, in Deep Purple. So there's this huge, we can talk about Ronnie forever. So Ronnie and I was really close. So singing his songs were a little easier. The Heaven and Hell thing at High Voltage was a real tribute to Ronnie. And when Tony picks the phone up and asks me to do stuff like that, and Geezer, who's one of my closest friends who lives next to me in LA, I'm always in for it.